It all started on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. The house was quiet, too quiet actually. My husband had stepped out to run errands, leaving me with my two stepchildren, Mia and Ethan. They're great kids, but we're still navigating the complicated waters of blending our family. As someone who's new to this stepmom role, I try my best to give them space, but I also want them to know I care. That's why, when Mia and Ethan came running down the hall with urgency written all over their faces, I couldn't ignore it. Can you come with us? It's really important, Mia asked, her voice slightly shaky. Ethan nodded beside her, his big brown eyes darting between me and his sister. They weren't fighting like usual. In fact, there was something strange about the way they looked at each other, almost like they were sharing a silent conversation. Is everything okay? I asked, trying to mask my concern. My question only seemed to make them more anxious. Just come, Ethan said, tugging on my arm. Please. I followed them down the hallway, my curiosity quickly turning into a gnawing sense of unease. Kids have a way of making even the most mundane situations feel dramatic, but this felt different. They weren't playing a prank or trying to get me to mediate a sibling argument. There was something serious about their tone, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. They led me to Ethan's room of all places. It's usually a mess of comic books, action figures, and random socks. But today, everything was oddly tidy, as if they'd been preparing for something. Mia closed the door behind us, her hand lingering on the knob for a moment before letting it go. All right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What's going on? They exchanged a glance again, the kind that only siblings can share. Then Mia took a deep breath and said, We need to show you something, but you have to promise not to freak out. Now my heart was racing. Freak out about what? Ethan reached under his bed and pulled out a small box. It looked old, worn, and completely out of place in a kid's room. He set it on the floor and gave Mia a nod. She knelt beside him, carefully undoing the clasp. Inside the box were items that made no sense. A faded photograph, a strange-looking key, and what looked like a crumpled piece of paper covered in writing. My stomach tightened as I stared at the contents, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This isn't just about us, Mia said quietly, her voice trembling. It's about you. I froze, my mind racing with questions I couldn't begin to articulate. What could they possibly mean? And why did I have the sinking feeling that whatever this was, it was about to change everything? My heart was pounding as I knelt down next to Mia and Ethan, my eyes darting between the objects in the box. The photograph caught my attention first. It was old, black and white with frayed edges, and showed a woman who looked strangely familiar. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes had this piercing quality that made it hard to look away. Who is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That's what we don't know, Ethan said, shifting uncomfortably. We found this box in the attic a few weeks ago, but we didn't know if we should show it to you or Dad. It, it felt like it was meant for you. For me? I repeated, completely baffled. I reached for the photograph, but my hands hesitated just above it. Something about the woman's gaze made me uneasy, as though she were looking straight through me. Mia nodded and pointed to the crumpled piece of paper. Read this, she said, her tone urgent. I carefully unfolded the paper, revealing a handwritten note. The writing was messy, as if it had been scribbled in a hurry, and parts of it were smudged. But the words I could make out sent a chill down my spine. To the one who finds this, the truth is closer than you think. Look for the key, and it will unlock more than just a door. But beware, some things are better left buried. What is this supposed to mean? I asked, looking up at the kids. We don't know, Mia admitted, biting her lip. But there's something weird about the key. We tried it on every lock in the house, and it doesn't fit anywhere. It has to mean something, right? Ethan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you think this has anything to do with Mom? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Their mother had passed away a few years before I met their father, and we rarely talked about her. I didn't want to overstep or dig up painful memories, but now I couldn't help wondering if this box had some connection to her. I don't know, I said carefully, my mind racing. But if it does, we need to figure it out. As I studied the strange key, a heavy silence fell over the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger, and that whatever lay ahead might change everything I thought I knew about this family, and even about myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. The photograph, the key, and the cryptic note replayed in my mind like a loop I couldn't escape. I thought about the kids, how scared they looked, how unsure they seemed. They weren't the type to make up stories or play games like this. Whatever they'd found, it felt real. Too real. The next morning, I decided to dig a little deeper. While the kids were at school, I went up to the attic. It was a space I hadn't spent much time in, a dusty, forgotten place full of old boxes, furniture, and memories that didn't belong to me. I told myself I was just looking for clues, but deep down, I wondered if I'd stumble across something I wasn't ready to face. I searched for hours, combing through boxes labeled with names I didn't recognize and flipping through old photo albums. Nothing seemed connected to the mysterious box until I found a faded envelope wedged between two books. My name wasn't on it, but my husband's late wife's name, Claire, was written in neat cursive. My fingers trembled as I opened it, revealing another note. This one was different. It was longer, more deliberate, and every word felt like it carried weight. It spoke about a secret, one that Claire had been keeping from everyone, even her family. It warned about consequences, how the truth could unravel everything if it ever came to light. I sat there, staring at the note, my mind spinning. What was this secret? Why had Claire hidden it? And why was it somehow tied to me now? When the kids got home, I didn't mention the letter. Not yet. But I could see it in their eyes. They were waiting for answers, just like I was. Little did any of us know, the answers we sought might be far more dangerous than we ever imagined. Over the next few days, the house felt different, heavier, as though the air itself carried the weight of everything left unsaid. I couldn't stop thinking about the note from the attic and the box the kids had found. Each time I looked at Mia and Ethan, I saw the same unspoken questions in their eyes. They were waiting for me to make sense of it all, but I didn't even know where to begin. One evening, after dinner, I finally decided it was time to bring up what I'd found. I called the kids into the living room and showed them Claire's note. Their faces paled as they read it, their expressions a mix of fear and confusion. What kind of secret could she have been keeping? Mia whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know, I admitted, but I think the box, the key, and this note are all connected. We just have to figure out how. Ethan suddenly sat up straighter, his face lighting up with realization. Wait, the key. What if it's not for a door? What if it's for something else? Mia's eyes widened. Like a chest or a safe. The thought hadn't crossed my mind, but it made sense. Do you know of anything like that? I asked. The kids exchanged a nervous glance. There's, there's an old trunk in the basement, Mia said slowly. It's been there forever. Dad never opens it. My heart began to race. Then we need to check it out. We made our way down to the basement, the creak of the stairs echoing in the silence. The trunk was tucked into a dark corner, covered in dust and cobwebs. My hands shook as I fit the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. But as I began to lift the lid, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was inside might be more than we bargained for. As I lifted the lid of the trunk, a musty smell filled the air, like a mix of old wood and forgotten memories. Inside, there were layers of carefully folded fabric. Blankets, maybe? At first glance, it seemed like nothing unusual, just the kind of stuff you'd expect in an old trunk. But as I pulled back the layers, my hands brushed against something solid. It was another box, much smaller than the one the kids had found, and it looked ancient. The wood was dark and worn, with intricate carvings etched into its surface, symbols that I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened as I lifted it out of the trunk, its unexpected weight sending a chill through me. "What is that?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," I said, setting it on the floor. There was no visible lock, just a lid that seemed to be sealed shut. Ethan leaned closer, squinting at the carvings. "Those symbols, they look like something I saw in Mom's old journal," he said. "What journal?" I asked, my head snapping toward him. "Her diary," Mia said quietly. "We found it a long time ago in her things, but Dad told us not to read it. He said it wasn't for us." My breath caught. "Do you still have it?" Mia nodded. "It's in my room." Within minutes, she returned with a worn leather journal, and I flipped through its pages. Most of the entries were ordinary, day-to-day thoughts, memories of the kids. But then I reached the final pages. The handwriting became erratic, the tone shifting dramatically. "The key must stay hidden. If it falls into the wrong hands, everything could unravel. Protect them at all costs, even from me." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "What does this mean?" I murmured, mostly to myself. Before anyone could respond, there was a loud thud from upstairs. All three of us froze, staring at each other with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. I nodded, my heart racing. We weren't expecting anyone, and my husband wasn't due back for hours. The thud came again, louder this time, followed by what sounded like slow, deliberate footsteps. The air in the basement felt suffocating as we stood there, paralyzed with fear. Something, or someone, was in the house. And suddenly, the mystery of the trunk felt like the least of our problems. The footsteps grew louder, each one sending a jolt of fear through me. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a burglar? Someone who knew about the trunk? Or worse, someone tied to Claire's mysterious warning? I motioned for the kids to stay behind me as I grabbed an old fireplace poker leaning against the wall. My hands trembled as I gripped it tightly, ready for whatever or whoever was about to come through that door. The basement door creaked open, and I held my breath. A familiar voice called out, "It's me! What are you doing down here?" Relief and confusion hit me all at once. It was my husband, standing at the top of the stairs with a puzzled look on his face. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back early?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "I didn't plan to," he said, walking down the stairs. But I got a weird call from the security company. Something about movement in the house when no one was supposed to be here. I froze, my grip tightening on the poker. The security company called? But we've been here all day. Before he could answer, Ethan spoke up. "Dad, do you know what this is?" He pointed to the small carved box we had pulled from the trunk. My husband's expression changed instantly. His face went pale and his jaw tightened. "Where did you find that?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "In the trunk," I said. "What is it? What aren't you telling us?" He hesitated, glancing at the kids before finally sighing. "It's something Claire left behind. Something she was trying to protect. I thought I had gotten rid of it." Before anyone could process his words, the box began to hum softly, a vibration we could feel in the air. The lid popped open on its own, revealing what looked like an old, intricately carved pendant, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. "What is that?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. My husband stepped back, his face filled with fear. "It's what she was warning us about. We were never supposed to open that box." Before we could react, the light from the pendant flared, filling the room with an intense glow. For a moment, everything felt weightless, as though time itself had stopped. Then, just as suddenly, the light vanished, and so did the pendant. We stared at the empty box in stunned silence. Whatever we had unleashed was gone, but the uneasy feeling in the air told me this was far from over. Claire's secret hadn't just been revealed, it had been set loose, and whatever was coming next, we would have to face it together. The room was silent, save for the sound of our unsteady breathing. We all stared at the empty box, trying to process what had just happened. My husband looked shaken in a way I had never seen before, his hands gripping the edge of the trunk like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Mia and Ethan huddled close to me, their wide eyes full of questions I wasn't sure how to answer. "What was that?" Ethan finally asked, breaking the silence. My husband exhaled slowly, his shoulders slumping. "It's hard to explain," he said, his voice heavy. "Claire found that pendant years ago. She believed it had some kind of power, something dangerous. She told me she was trying to protect the family by keeping it hidden, but she never said much more than that. I thought she was just being paranoid. After she passed, I didn't know what to do with it, so I locked it away. But it's gone now," I said, trying to keep my voice calm for the kids' sake. "Does that mean it's over?" He shook his head. "I don't know. If Claire was right, then whatever was tied to that pendant is out there now, and we have no idea what that means." The weight of his words hung over us, but I knew we couldn't live in fear of the unknown. I knelt down beside Mia and Ethan, wrapping my arms around them. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together, as a family." They nodded, and for the first time that night, I saw a glimmer of trust in their eyes. We had uncovered something that could have torn us apart, but instead, it had brought us closer. Over the next few days, life returned to a strange kind of normal. The box was placed back in the trunk, this time empty, and the journal went back to Mia's room. We never spoke of the pendant again, but its memory lingered, a quiet reminder of the mysteries we'd faced and the ones we might still encounter. As I tucked the kids into bed one night, Mia looked up at me and said, "Do you think Mom knew this would happen?" I paused, then smiled softly. "I think she trusted us to handle it, and I think she'd be proud of how strong you've been." In the end, Claire's secret had changed everything, but it also reminded us of something far more important, that no matter what we face, we're stronger together.